Perspectives. My name is Gail, and since he's already showing up on the screen, you probably already figured out that my guest for today is Bill Kuwik. Thank you for coming on again. It's been 6 months since you've been on an episode, quite a long time for you. But I want to thank you for being such a good sport about coming on as often as you do. And so anyways, I wanted to ask you if you were able to keep your massage therapy business open.
I actually had to close from, I think the shelter-in-place order came March 21st for the 22nd, and I was able to open, I think, June 22nd, so it was really 4 months. But because I couldn't find hand sanitizer, and I kind of thought, I think I really could use the money, and I would like to start working, but I think I want to wait a week just to be extra careful. And I know, like, a lot of people ask me in the summer, it's like, why aren't you going after the Chautauqua clients? It's like, they're coming from Florida and New York City. I really didn't even return phone calls, and I figured
really?
when the college came back in that I would also wait a couple of weeks before I would let anybody. But I've only had like a couple of students, and it's been more recent anyway. So, but yeah, and actually that's because of everything, I wasn't even sure whether I'd be able to open the massage business. So I actually started planting more vegetables, and I did more mushrooms this year than I've ever done.
Wow.
Friend of mine brought me a truckload of beech trees. I took down some a big hard maple, and so yeah, a lot of people are like, well, are you getting bored? It's like, bored? It's like I'm so tired from doing all this
From
farm
working
work.
so hard all the time.
And I really literally had like very little time extra. I was just planting stuff, and I know, like, and these are my potatoes, by the way. These are a red fingerling, and nobody could find any seed potatoes. I don't know if you guys grew potatoes this year.
We did. They actually turned out pretty good.
There were no seed potatoes available. Nobody could find seed potatoes because everybody bought them all up, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? So actually, these are russets. I just bought a bag of russets from Wegmans, and just let them sit in room temperature for a while, and they all sprouted, and that's where these came from. And then I had red, white, and blue fingerlings, and again, I let them sit out. They were not organic, so they didn't sprout as quickly, and I thought they might be sprayed with an anti-sprouting agent.
Ew.
So I washed them in like warm soapy water, and then the red ones actually started to sprout very quickly after I washed them. I did get some of the white ones to sprout, and then the blue ones, I didn't get any blue. They all just decayed before I even planted those. But
that's too bad.
So a good little tip if you can't find seed potato. You can grow any kind of potatoes, and I know a lot of people say, well, the regular potatoes will sprout in my compost pile, but that may be true, but how many months did they sit in the rain and whatever else, and to do that? I mean, if you want to grow a potato, you really need it to sprout and grow fairly quickly. And I know, we were talking earlier about you were going to ask about garlic, planting garlic, and today, Halloween.
Yes, I wanted to mention that to those of you in the viewing audience. You won't be seeing this for a few weeks, but today we're recording this program on Halloween, and Bill is wearing a shirt with a spider on it.
But yeah, so but I don't know if you know this, but in the pagan calendar, I know a lot of people might dismiss that, but the pagans were people of the earth, and Samhain is also it can be October 31st or November 1st, and according to their calendar, this is the last day that you can still find things that are harvestable out. And we were supposed to have a freeze last night, so it's kind of that time. Not that everything is damaged by a freeze. Cabbage actually can go down to 13 degrees.
Oh, can it? Oh my gosh.
Lettuce can go down to 21 degrees. I don't know what the temperature is on cilantro, but this cilantro, this lettuce, these Daikon radishes were planted on September 3rd little bit late for the daikons. These are some daikon radish that I just picked this morning.
Okay, yeah.
This is miyashigi, which I have grown them where they're as big around as my arm and as long as my arm. So they'll be like that and like this.
Yeah, I was surprised when I first ate dashiki. Daikon radishes. We were talking about dashiki shirts earlier, so of course I would say the wrong word. But anyways, the first time I ever ate a daikon radish, I was surprised at how mild tasting it was.
Oh, they're super sweet. Well, in fact, here's one for you.
You know,
if you want to taste that one, I did put a little salt on it.
Okay.
They're super tender too. I mean, they're not tough and woody at all. Well, of course, this is a 48-day radish, and it has been more than 48 days. But you know, our light levels are low, and not really long days of sunshine. But
it's been raining almost every day for at least 2 or more weeks.
Yeah, the last couple of weeks, which actually has been great for the mushroom growing.
Oh yeah.
I had some logs that I really wasn't even 100% sure what was going to happen because they were inoculated last year in the springtime. I did get a picking last November and a little bit this last spring, but yeah, I've been picking probably 25 pounds of mushrooms a week for the last couple of weeks. And
wow.
Had some shiitake too. I could have brought a couple of those today, but I have like bags of these. This is a pohu oyster mushroom, and I have Akira oyster as well. But yeah, I mean, you know, we're supposed to be talking about fall vegetables, and I mean the cabbage. Now this was started. I started the seeds for this on Memorial Day. They were planted in the ground. I believe it was July the 11th, and it's a 94-day cabbage, so they just really came to full maturity in these last couple of weeks. And again, they can go down to 13 degrees.
Wow.
And they will not freeze. I know 2 years ago, we didn't have any severe cold weather, but on Thanksgiving morning, they were predicting 12. So I was like, I got to go out there and pick them. So in the evening, just about sunset, I'm out there with a steel-handled knife, and I got 1 bushel cut. I was like, I have to go in the car and warm my fingers up, and I thought I'll be able to cut 2 this time, and I was able to do one bushel with each hand warm up. But like I said, the daikon, the cilantro, and this lettuce was all planted on September the 3rd, and I've been picking lettuce for a couple of weeks now. And these are all just sort of like little baby heads of it's a mix. It's called All-Star Gourmet lettuce mix. So there's this one that's a little bit more. It
looks really good.
Red and
yummy.
You know, sort of frilly looking, and then there's more like oak leaf types. And I don't see one in here, but I did have one. It's called deer tongue. It just has
tongue?
Has like a pointy. I know I used to grow a red deer tongue and a green deer tongue, but the green is part of this All-Star Gourmet lettuce mix, which you can get from Johnny Selected Seed, or Fedco also has that. But really, I mean, if you want like full-size lettuce, and I'm thinning these and leaving like bigger ones, and I will put up hoops and row cover them here soon. But you can actually grow like full heads of lettuce. Like what I used to do when I grew for like lots and lots of restaurants was I would plant in the little four-pack cell trays around August 1st, and then around Labor Day you have a nice little plant, maybe a little smaller than those, ready to go on the ground. So by mid-October you have full-size heads of lettuce to harvest, and so that's another way to do it. But this was just like a baby lettuce mix, so I just ran my cedar up and down, did like 6, maybe 20-foot long rows, not a lot. And same with the daikon. I did plant turnips because they should have been able to mature in time, but the seed was old and it didn't germinate, so I didn't get any turnips. But beautiful cilantro, beautiful lettuce. These daikons, a little bit young, but still good. And of course the squash, that's winter, or I mean it's sort of a fall harvest, but these were planted in early to mid-June, and I don't know if anybody knows, but this is a delicata squash, and something a little interesting of note, if you don't know, these types of squashes, and this is a good example here too, this is a little dirty, but any of these types of squashes, you need to see that orange kind of spot to know that they're fully matured.
Oh, okay.
You don't normally, you do see a little bit of that orangish on the delicata, but a delicata squash can be picked and eaten the day you pick it. These types of squashes, the acorn, this is a buttercup. If you look at the bottom of it, this is the butternut. Looks like a big peanut. But that one, these need to ripen. These need to sit and cure for a couple of weeks after they're picked, as opposed to that. And I should have brought one. I have the orange Kubocha Sunshine, which is a favorite. Really, really smooth texture, super, super sweet. Very similar to this, but it's shaped more like this, but in a super, super like almost like reddish orange color. Oh, and then here too, something a little different, a little unique. I've been growing my own turmeric for the last few years.
Okay.
And the first year I planted 2 pieces that were about this big. I left them in a plastic bag for a while, let them sprout. Then I just put them, shallowly in the soil. And first I put them just in a kitty litter bucket, like a 5-gallon kitty litter bucket the first year. And I mean, they grew probably almost 2 feet tall, beautiful plant. Didn't notice any flowers, but then last year in the springtime, I dumped that bucket. It seemed kind of wet, but there was 2 chunks about as big as my fist last year in the spring, so I put it into a big, huge terracotta-colored plastic pot. It probably holds like at least 10 gallons. And I just brought it in last fall, and it died back, and my dogs will eat the soil off the top of plants, so I had to add more soil to it this springtime. And I never dug it up, figuring I would dig it up this spring or this fall. And I mean, I had clumps like this, like there was a rim of that pot where, I mean, I don't even know what I got, but it was probably in the neighborhood of 10 pounds or more of turmeric. And as we've talked about before, the health qualities of the benefits of turmeric. So I will actually juice it fresh, but this afternoon my plan is to make kimchi with which we've done on air too.
Oh, yeah,
with cabbage, carrots, the sweet and hot peppers, garlic, onions, and lots of ginger. But I will actually slice this thin and add turmeric to it, and then some dried chili pepper.
Yeah, Carl has been making sauerkraut. As soon as he starts to, he hasn't planted any cabbage, but he'll go to like Brigiota's over in Jamestown and like that, and pick up when we start to get low on sauerkraut. He goes and buys a couple of more heads of cabbage.
It only takes about a week the way I do it, but this is actually it's called Caitlin is the varietal name.
Caitlin?
Yeah, Kaitlin, or is it maybe YN? But it's a Johnny Selected Seed variety. But I don't really know what this means, but they say it has more dry matter than a normal cabbage, and it's supposed to be specifically bred for fermenting for sauerkrauts, but it's also good storage cabbage, and I will be giving you this and the mushrooms at the end of today.
Oh, wow.
But
oyster mushrooms, yummy.
have you ever cooked them? Do you know what to do?
Yeah. They're quite, I like them.
They're because of, like you mentioned, all the rain, they have been like so full of moisture, and a mushroom,
mushroom's watery anyway.
90%, 90 to 92 or 3% water, depending on the mushroom. But I've been telling people it's like slice them small and cook them for a long time because they take a while to brown up because there's so much moisture in them.
Yeah.
But I will say though, with the potatoes, and I don't know, you plant potatoes? You and Carl plant?
Carl does plant potatoes. Yes, he does. We've probably got enough to get us through enough potatoes to get through the winter.
I have to admit, I did not do that well. I got all those potatoes. I sprouted them on my kitchen counter. I cut them into pieces that made sure I had at least 1 or 2 eyes on each piece. And I was told by someone who was a professional potato grower, that's all they grew, that they always planted their potatoes between the 4th and the 11th of July. And I'm like, July? That just seems so late to me, because I mean, I used to plant my potatoes in May.
And where were they? Where did they grow them?
Cassadaga.
Cassadaga?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's all he grew was potatoes. And But I got to thinking about it. It's like, well, rather than just be like, deny what this guy could possibly, that he could be right, I'm thinking, well, he is a professional potato grower. And like, why then? Well, most potatoes, your early season potatoes are 60 to 70 day, mid-season are 70 to 80 day, and your late season potatoes are 80 to 90 days. Well, if you do the math, let's say the beginning of July, August, September, October, so by the beginning of October, that's when your potatoes are really, really ready, or maybe by mid-October, they're actually really, really completely ready. And when I used to grow them, I mean, I'd be harvesting potatoes in August. Well, how do you keep them in August? Your root cellar isn't cold enough, and if you have to keep them in the refrigerator, that takes up a lot of space. So this way, it makes a lot more sense, because you're harvesting them when the temperatures are already cooler, so you don't have to worry about a storage place for them. And I don't know if you know this too, but I honestly, if I'm in a store and I didn't bring any beets or carrots, but beets, carrots, or potatoes, I don't wash them. I actually pick them, leave them dirty, put them in a bucket, put them in a bag, and that moist soil actually helps them retain their moisture and their this texture a lot better, a lot longer. I know when I worked in Vermont, we used to dig up 30-pound bags of carrots, and like I said, I actually, after I measured my carrots, I actually shoveled soil into the bag. It really does make a big difference to keep it that way.
I do have a question about potatoes.
Okay.
We've noticed in recent years, it hasn't always been that way, but it's something we've been noticing in recent years, maybe the last decade or so, is quite often potatoes will have like a bad spot way in the center.
Oh.
What causes that?
Where it's a little bit brown?
A little bit,
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes
it'll just be something way in the middle, way in the center. We were wondering what causes that.
I think sometimes the wireworms will get inside of them.
Wireworms? Is that what causes that?
Yeah, they're like a nematode. Something you could do is plant marigolds around your potatoes.
Along with the potatoes.
I thought you were going to say scab, and I know I don't see any scab on any of mine, but they say that potatoes grow in a more acid soil will tend to have less scab problems, but that just sounds like maybe a little bit of bug damage or something like that. But it doesn't sound like it's an infestation or anything like that. I was getting those sometimes in my garlic and sometimes in my my carrots. They would get to my carrots a little bit. But what I've read, and I always think marigolds are good in the garden anyway. But they say if you grow a marigold in a spot, and at the end of the season, just like chop it up and let it just decay right where it grew. They say in that area, or in an area of about 3 feet by 3 feet, you will have no nematodes for 3 years if you grind up a marigold plant like that.
Wow.
And I know we were going to talk about garlic planting. And,
right.
This is the day. I mean, I always say that, like Halloween, and I have planted as late as the 8th of November, and that was 2 years ago. It was super, super wet, and I was just waiting for the day. And I know I had a 6 o'clock appointment at my office, and I was just going to go out with the bulbs, and I was going to break them up and put them in the ground. And I talked to a friend of mine, and she said, I was going to do that. She goes, but it was so cold out. She goes, I figured my hands would get cold before I was done. I'm like, she's right. And so I sat at my kitchen counter with buckets, and I popped all the cloves into buckets, and then I went out there. It was 4:15 by the time I could go out on November the 8th. So got down on my hands and knees, and I had 2 buckets, 2 different varieties, and I planted 3 rows in this bed, turned around, 3 rows in the other bed. It was something like 5:08 when I was done, so it took me just under an hour to plant them. And I was like, and I have 52 minutes to get to my appointment. And just got those in, and I did not mulch them before this, but I know I went to Ohio the next day, and the next morning I was hearing like thunder, so that was November the 10th, and we ended up with 7 inches of snow that morning. But
oh gosh,
a lot of people would think that was maybe a bad thing, but the snow actually insulates the ground, and so it's not going to get as cold underneath there. So you kind of have a snow mulch over the top of it.
Speaking of thunder in the fall, there's this old saying. I remember my years ago, when my grandparents were alive, and if you'd get a thunderstorm in the fall, they'd say, they have this little rhyme they used to say, thunder in the fall, no winter at all.
Well, what I heard was if it thunders when it's snowing or it thunders in the fall, there won't be any winter at all. But I have seen where there's been really, really mild winters when that has happened, but I've also seen it where that was not true.
Yeah, too, so. Yeah. Well, it must have been something that came from observing what the winter was like.
Right.
So everything is so different now, Bill. I mean, things aren't as predictable as they used to be with this climate change and everything. Things just aren't the way they used to be.
When it comes to farming, I mean, a great example is the cucumber beetle. For 30 years, if you planted your squash on or after June 15th, there were less cucumber beetles. So if you planted them early, they would get your plants. But if you waited, there would be a big flush of them in the early spring, and then they would die back. So if you waited until June 15th to plant, there would be so few of them it wouldn't be a problem.
Really?
Now I wait until June 15th. I even row cover them for like a couple of weeks, uncover them, and they'll still get decimated like that. I know in 2017, I planted 4 different heirloom pumpkins and 8 different heirloom squashes. They looked gorgeous for like 2 weeks, and I was walking my dogs one morning. I'm like, what is going on out there? It's like, what happened to those beautiful green plants that I had? And it just overnight just decimated. I didn't get a single squash or a single pumpkin out of 12 rows of stuff. But yeah, it is different, and I mean farmers everywhere are struggling with the heat, the drought. I was thinking it was just me, and I know another grower that's on Facebook with me, and he says, this is the way it is. This is all I have. He said, that's all you get. Just odds and ends, basically, because I would say one of my worst tomato years ever this year, but I think that was just the compost that I used just was not finished enough. There was too many wood chips, sawdust in it, so it was, I think, taking nitrogen from my soil. But yeah, I mean, fall is the harvest season, and I mean there is a lot still out there. And like I said, I mean you can plant things. I mean I've planted oftentimes what I've done, and I didn't do it this year, but when I dig my garlic up in like mid to late July, I prepare the soil, I add new compost to it, and I'll plant beets and carrots at the end of July or beginning of August. And I've had people come over in September and look at my beets. They're like, "Oh, those aren't going to mature." It's like you come back here at the end of October, and I mean they're not huge big beets, but I mean I'll get a nice like 2.5-3 inch beet, which are just perfectly good. And that's something I was thinking about. We should talk about too. And same with like carrots, is that there are people, and you can do this, but you plant your beets and your carrots, let's say around Memorial Day, then they grow all summer, and then some people are still thinking that those are carrots and beets that you can eat in the fall, and you can, but I mean, if the package of beets says 52 days and you planted them on Memorial Day, 52 days would be like somewhere in July.
I actually think that beets taste a lot better when they're small.
Yeah.
And young,
tender, right. So
and then with the carrots, if you let them grow too long, they get really super huge, and the center of them is like wood.
Oh yeah, they get tough, and they lose their flavor. They don't have the sweetness to them at all. And I actually heard, and I was like, I can't believe that this is a cooperative extensions person from Cornell said this, but they say if you leave the carrots in the ground until the ground freezes or until winter, then you can dig them up and they'll sweeten up. It's like, so it was a sweet carrot and it got old and tough and it turned to kind of a starchy, tough carrot, and just by putting it in cold, it's going to sweeten back up again. And I really have never, ever found that myself. I mean, I've grown carrots to be ready in the fall, and then we get early snowfall, and I'll go out there and pick them. And if you get a lot of snow, the snow kind of mulches them in and protects them too. And I've gone out in the springtime and picked amazingly tasty carrots. I've picked carrots in January, but they were not the carrots that I planted in the early part of the summer that I left out there. And great example, I make a roasted beet salad, which is I used to grow these Lutz beets, which this would be a small one. I mean, sometimes like bigger than a human head, but roasted. And then I make a Dijon vinaigrette, and then you throw handfuls of chopped walnuts and crumbled blue cheese over it, and then the Dijon vinaigrette. And I made it for a Labor Day party, and everybody was loving this. And a friend of mine said, he said, did you do something special to those beets? Because I mean, we made some, and they just didn't have the flavor. They weren't that sweet, and they seemed kind of tougher. I said, well, I said a lot of people will plant beets in the spring and then think, well, they're still there, so there's still beets, but they get tough and woody, and I said they don't really have any flavor. And I noticed my friend Dan was sort of squirming in his seat, and he was like, oh, well, I have to admit, that's kind of what I did. So he was the one that supplied the other friend with the beets. And
my favorite way is just when it's the greens with a little baby ones, you know.
Yeah.
So
and I grow a variety that's called baby beet, and they only get about that big. But yeah, I like them when they're young too. And I'll actually, one of my favorite things when I ate dairy was I would just take those little beets, cut the root off it, cut the stalk off it, wash them up real good, and just put a little bit of water and a little bit of butter in the pan and let them steam until they're cooked through, and then just drizzle a little honey over the top of that, so they're sort of like honey butter glazed little baby beets, but even just the steamed beets. But I do like them with the greens as well. But yeah, I mean, if you know that, I mean, we may have had a little bit of a freeze last night, but this is kind of typical that you can go till the end of October without a freeze. So I mean, if you can figure, if you want to plant certain things like lettuce and the cilantro, like I said, I'm not sure what the temperature it can go down to, but I have actually gone out into my garden and been like, I know there was cilantro out here someplace, and I've got 6 inches of snow, and I'm digging through the snow, and I find the cilantro underneath the snow, and it's completely good.
Right.
And I was just telling somebody yesterday that I wasn't, because somebody's like, I didn't know you could plant cilantro late. And like I said, this was September 3rd.
You planted it on September 3rd.
Right, but one year I was supposed to be going out to dinner with a couple of friends, and one had never seen my garden before. And I was like, I think I'm going to try and plant cilantro. And it was September 21st. And I read the packet, and it said you can grow successions from mid-spring until the end of summer. I'm like, well, today is the end of summer, and I planted it on September 21st. It germinated, it came up. I was able to harvest it in October, and it actually, not all of it, but it made it through the winter, and it grew back the next spring. So it went to seed fairly quickly, but I actually got a crop off of the same planting of September 21st in the springtime, because it made it through the winter. And I have on a few occasions, but I think once it gets older and it gets a little bit more mature and it starts going to seed, it's not going to overwinter for you. But it is cold hardy, super cold hardy. And a lot of people call it like Mexican parsley, so you'd think it's like a warm weather thing, but if you grow cilantro in hot weather, it'll bolt the seed almost instantly as soon as you grow it. So. But that's a good one. I mean, parsley does really, really well in the fall too, and I thought I brought parsley with me, but apparently not. But lettuce, again, really great fall crop. If you can get spinach to germinate, you could actually start growing spinach in July or in August, and it would be usually 50 days or something like that, so late August. But I've experimented before, because actually spinach germinates best at 39 degrees soil temperature. So what I've actually done in the past is I've actually taken a moist paper towel, put my spinach seeds in that, wet it down just a little bit more, put it in a Ziploc bag, and put it in my refrigerator
Oh,
for
okay.
a few days to hope to see if that would aid the germination. But I can't say for sure whether it did, because I didn't do like, non-refrigerated next to the refrigerated to see, and it didn't really seem like it made that much of a difference. I don't know if it would or if it did or didn't, but it does prefer cooler weather, and there is that, I think we talked about before, thermal dormancy. Lettuce and spinach for sure, and some other crops, if the temperature is too high, they will not germinate. The seeds just simply won't germinate because they like cooler weather, so they don't want to germinate when it's hot.
I really love parsley and cilantro. Now, I can remember being at a meal at a restaurant with a group of people one time, and I had something, with some parsley and like that they had put on for garnishes.
Right.
And one of the people that was there was somebody who had at one previous time owned a catering business where they catered meals and stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'm eating the garnishes, I'm eating the slice of lemon and so forth. And he's making some comment about you're not supposed to eat the garnishes.
Right.
And I'm going, like that's the healthiest part of what's on my plate right now, know.
Sometimes it is.
Parsley and cilantro are actually extremely beneficial
there are a lot of nutrients in parsley
foods.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I know the cilantro is considered a liver cleanser. It's supposed to pull heavy metals from your body.
Yeah. I heard that it would pull toxins out of your body. So, and actually, I love the taste of it. Not everybody loves the taste of it.
It's funny though too. I know. I don't believe this whole thing about you have an enzyme in your body, because I have friends who came to visit me when I lived in Ohio, and they had never tried cilantro before. So I made some salsa. I think we made some burritos or something like that. They loved it, so they planted their own. Well, the next year they had this barrel, and they had lettuce, and they had some other things in there, so they made a salad. But I think they used a lot of cilantro, and they both said they took like one bite and looked at each other like, dish soap. It tastes like dish soap, and they could never eat it again. It's like, well, if it's an enzyme in your body that makes you like it or not like it, how did they like it the first time they had it, but not the second time? It just doesn't add up, really, to me. But I know we talked about this on we did the show on anti-cancer diet and lifestyle, but the oyster mushrooms, again, super beneficial.
Right.
There was a study done in, I believe, Japan, where women who had breast cancer, who had chemo, one control group just did whatever. Another group ate a serving of oyster mushrooms every day. Another group ate or had a certain amount of green tea every day. And the fourth group had the oyster mushrooms and the green tea. The women who ate the oyster mushrooms and the green tea every day, there was virtually no incidence of recurrence. It was way low for the people who ate the mushrooms and had the green tea. Either or actually were beneficial, but combined, there was really no incidence of recurrence. Whereas in the group, the control group, I can't remember what the numbers were, but it was definitely a lot higher.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So. Definitely. And shiitake mushrooms. I remember, did I ever tell you the story about how a doctor diagnosed me as having thyroid cancer one time? No, I never told you that story. So. But anyway, I refused to let them take out my thyroid gland and went to an herbalist. And one of the things the herbalist had me do was there was a product that I could get that was a powder that was concentrated amounts of a certain nutrient from shiitake mushrooms. And it was supposed to, when it traveled through your body, it was supposed to, when it found, it would run across abnormal DNA, and it would go to work to change it over to normal DNA.
Right.
So Well, between that and the rest of the diet I was doing and poultices and things like that, the problem just sort of went away.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember the herbalist had told me that it was good to use that concentrated amount of that nutrient like that, because she said you'd have to eat an awful lot of mushrooms in order to do it.
I don't know about that so much, because I do know people who have actually gotten completely over their cancer, and they actually built a grow house and they were growing their own shiitake mushrooms to eat them.
Yeah, so anyways, I mean, it worked.
Right.
It
worked.
Yeah.
I mean,
so I've been a fan of, we eat a lot of mushrooms now. I've been a big fan of eating mushrooms for anti-cancer effects ever since.
Yeah, I try to eat some mushrooms every day. Every morning with breakfast, I'll have some of those.
Well, Ann Watkins, who puts on the Vegetarian Vegan Society dinners with me, doesn't like mushrooms.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not sure. She said ever since she was a little girl, and I'm not sure why.
I know it's funny, because one woman I know who's vegan, she told me that she was trying to tell me that the white button mushroom has more protein and more good stuff in it for a vegan than any other mushroom. Like, I really don't think that that's true at all. In fact, there's actually the button mushroom, the portobello, and the baby bellas. Just recently learned that, and I don't eat them anymore, that there are actually cancer-causing agents in white button mushrooms. And
do you think that maybe it's now I'm seeing some that you can find on the grocery store shelves that are labeled as being organically grown,
right?
And then I didn't know that all mushrooms weren't organically grown.
If you see the brand Phillips, they actually, I tried to order some organic lion's mane from Wegmans before. And they asked me, is it really important that it's actually certified organic? Because they told me that Phillips, which is like in Kennett Square near Philadelphia, like biggest mushroom grower in this country actually, they said that they grow everything organically, but they only have one part that is considered technically certified organic, but they use all organic methods for all their mushroom growing. Actually,
yeah, okay. I was just wondering.
But what I'm saying though is the button mushroom itself causes.
Do you know if some mushrooms are organically grown and some are not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there are gnats. I mean, there are mushroom gnats that will eat them. I know, like Paul Stamets, my teacher, mentor, guru, mushroom guru. He told us when we went into his grow houses. He said, "No," he said, "they'll probably run out of the way," but he said, "Just be careful." He introduces tree frogs, little tiny tree frogs,
is that right?
into his grow houses, because the frogs will eat the gnats. So you don't need to spray them. So he actually has a natural...
So that's how the organically grown ones are probably grown, is with the little tree frogs?
Oh, I don't know. His are, but I mean, I don't know what they do at, like, at Phillips or Kennett Square. I don't really know what they do, but I mean, I grow all these outdoors without anything. I mean, sometimes the ones that are real low on the logs, you'll get slugs on them and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I know I probably told you this during one of our mushroom talks, but Paul was in Saigon City, and he saw a Nikon camera lens on the ground, and he picked it up, checked all his cameras. He's like, well, I have all mine. So he was like, did somebody lose their lens cover camera, lens cover? And there was a guy there that recognized Paul. And he's like, oh, he said, you're Paul Stamets. You have to come. You have to come to my house. And they were like little bamboo slat, like screens that made up this little hut that he had. And he had shelves with lion's mane mushrooms growing out of sawdust blocks. And Paul said, you could see the mold on the walls, and he said you could see light coming through. He said, so it's not airtight to keep the bugs out. And he asked him, he said, what do you do about the bugs? He said, oh, the bugs don't bother me. He says, my problem, he says, rats. He says, the rats get in there and eat them. He says, so what do you do about the rats? He says, nothing. He said, the pythons eat the rats. And Paul was like, it's such a beautiful system.
The pythons. Well, he kept pythons in his grow house.
No, it was just that the wild pythons would come in, and eat them. So I don't know if I'd want to go in there in the dark to go pick any mushrooms. You'd be keeping rats and pythons away while you were there, but the pythons probably wouldn't bother the mushrooms, at least.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I do know that they will use some kind of sprays on certain types of mushrooms, especially like the button mushrooms and stuff like that. Because I mean, they're in a warm, humid, environment. Yeah, I do know that some are organically grown, some are not. I do know though that Phillips grows everything organically, but they have a certified organic section, and then the rest of their stuff is grown organically, but it's not
certified. It's just not certified,
Right.
but it is organic.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, I just wondered. It had never occurred to me that mushroom growers did not. I just never realized.
Yeah, they can get little bugs, little gnats. And, again, too, if you're growing indoors, you don't really have the predators. You don't have the birds and the other predatory insects that will, eat the damaging bugs. So, they have to do something. And I know even though when I first moved back here, this is going to organic tomato growing. I actually managed 6 greenhouses, 5,000 tomato plants when I was up in Vermont, and we had roll-up sides. So on a warm day, 150 foot long greenhouse, and I would crank the handle and roll up the sides so there'd be an opening from like your knees to about your chin, so the whole side of the greenhouse was open, so more cooler air could get inside, instead of just like you usually have the big giant fans at one end and the louvers at the other end to suck the air in. But we would open up the sides completely, and I want to say his name is Marion Labart. I met his granddaughter at Fredonia State, and she took me to his farm, and he was growing greenhouse tomatoes, but he was doing them hydroponically down in Bust-Eye.
Oh, okay.
And he had like those air filters that you use in your hot water or your forced air heat in your house. Mm-hmm. He had those on everything, screen doors, everything. And I was like, so what's with all this stuff? He's like, to keep the bugs out. I mean, you have to keep the bugs out. Like, really? Because I said, we grew them with everything wide open up in Vermont, and he just looked at me like I was out of my mind. Like, there's no way you could grow them without it. It's like, and I know for a fact that out of the 5,000 plants that we had the one year that I was up there, it was like early mid-October, and there was one bed, and it spread a little bit into the next bed. There was about 15 plants that had these little tiny black flies, and they were causing this. They were kind of stickiness on the tomato themselves. They're eating the leaves. And I contacted the owner, the farm owner, and we went down and looked at it. And he's like, well, he says, it's really just this one section. I said, just this bed and that little bed on that bed over there. He said, it must be just like a slight nutrient deficiency in this particular area. He said, let's just mark this and keep track of it. He said, but I don't think we're going to do anything about it. I mean, we're at the end of the season anyway. It's going to get, down into the, 10, 20, 30, 40 below zero up in Vermont. Those bugs and their larvae are not going to survive whether they're in the greenhouse or not. And we did nothing about them at all. I mean, again, out of 5,000 plants, there was maybe 15 that got sick. I mean, even it was 15 out of 100. That's only 15%, but 15 out of 1,000 would be like what, 1.5%. So it was 15 plants out of 5,000. It's like like a 300th of 1% or something like that total. And the tomatoes were still fine. They just needed to be washed a little bit before you could sell them. They still look good. It was just that they were damaging the plants. But yeah, people have different perspectives on what can and can't be done without or with chemicals. And all this, everything here, I mean, the only thing that I use, and it's not really a chemical, but it's a natural pesticide, is on the cabbage. Did not have to use it on the daikon or any of this other stuff, but it's Dipel is the trade name, but it's a diatomaceous, or it's not diatomaceous, or it's a Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a particular soil bacteria that would not hurt you or me or a deer or a dog or a rabbit or anything else that eats it. But it's very specific to the cabbage looper, the little green worms that you find in these usually.
Yeah.
And last year I know I only dusted them twice. This year I ended up doing it 3 times. I think the second time I dusted, I dusted them, and I think within a couple hours it rained. Now it's still there for a little bit even after it's rained, but it just seemed like they needed another little shot. You figure, over 100 days in the ground, and I didn't really do anything to them much. But and then another thing I do too, I mentioned this before, I know on another show, but I put the hoops up and put the row cover over them, and you sandbag it in. The bugs can't get to your plants that way too, and I've done that many times. The one thing you do have to be careful is if it's really, really wet, like these last few weeks that we've had, the last couple weeks, that cover does not allow them to dry out as quickly, so it stays a little bit more humid.
Yeah.
I know the one year I had a whole bed of Napa cabbage and another bed of baby bok choy, and I was just waiting and waiting. It was like, well, I know it's raining. I mean, they do need some moisture, and restaurant ordered some of that stuff, and I opened it up. I was like, there was enough for me to fill the order, but there was a lot of rotten Napa, and it wasn't like super old or anything like that either. But yeah, the Napa and the baby bok choy was like just, I mean, there was, like I said, I had enough to fill the order and a little bit more, but I mean, it literally like hundreds of plants that just disintegrated into rot. So there are other ways to protect your stuff without chemicals too. Some guy was arguing with me recently that we absolutely cannot grow food without the chemicals. We have to have it, and there's no way that you can grow anything. And I mentioned that, I don't know if we know this here, but the country of Bhutan has gone pure organic. There is not one thing grown in Bhutan that is not organically grown. Everything there is grown organically.
That's that place in the world that I've heard of where they make people's, isn't it something about people's happiness or something? They make, I'm thinking that Bhutan is where I heard that about where they...
It could be. I mean, it's right next to Nepal. I mean, it's kind of like the upscale Nepal, basically, is what I understand. But,
it's like where they put a lot of importance on the happiness of the people that live there.
Makes sense.
Instead of just like around...
The GNP?
Instead of just, like... In this country, you've got the big corporations that lobby around the government, and
I was doing kirtan with a group of people that were from Bhutan. I'll have to see if I can ask them. Yeah, there was like mostly Bhutan, but there were some people from Nepal also that were coming. It was on Sunday nights at Yoga Parkside. I don't know if they're still doing
Yoga
that.
Parkside?
Up in Buffalo.
Oh, up in Buffalo.
Yeah, right by the zoo, up that way. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know that about Bhutan, but I know it's supposed to be beautiful there, and very nice place to visit. I did not know that about their government being concerned with people's happiness. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it does sound good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's supposed to be beautiful there. I mean, it from what I've seen, and like I said, it was like, I guess they do have quite a lot of tourism there. But yeah, I saw something where they're like 100% committed to everything being grown organically. And I have to say too, though, I mean, I've had people say, "Oh, you can't grow corn without spraying it," and I tell people, it's like, I can go out and pick like 50 ears of corn, and I might find 1 or 2 that have worms in it, and that's with spraying nothing on that at all. And I've had conventional farmers saying, well, that's about how many I get too. And I know we've said this before, and I do insist this. I have actually seen where I have had a bug pest, and I'm thinking I need to do something with it, and just by keeping an eye on it, sometimes you get a flush of pests for a short period, 3 or 4 days. And most of us think like, oh, I have to go to the store and buy something to spray on there. Well, sometimes if you do nothing, they go away anyway, but then you spray and you think like, oh, see, I did that. I took care of that problem, but they might have just gone away on their own.
Well, Ann Watkins was telling me one time, we were talking about that kind of worms that gets in the corn cobs, And she goes, she said something about, those corn cobs are the ones that taste the best because the worms know.
Right.
The worms
Well,
know which ones that they taste the
Yeah,
best.
those are
so
those are
the
silkworms.
ones-
I don't know if you know this, but the organic people figured out that they actually go around. I mean, it's labor intensive. They go around. They have like a little squirter thing, little gun, and you put it like right to the silk and just give it a little squeeze, and it puts a little bit of soybean oil on there, and that keeps them out too.
Oh, does it?
I've always noticed that the raccoons seem to know when the corn is ready. I'll be like, look, oh, it's almost ready, but I'm going away this weekend. I'll come back from the weekend, and it's all gone.
Yeah.
They eat it all.
Yeah. They'll eat. They'll eat all of the corn in somebody's vegetable garden in one night.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The one thing though, and I was having problems with this before years ago, and somebody told me that Michigan organic farmers were having a problem with that raccoons getting into the corn, and they said red fox urine, because a red fox and a raccoon compete for the same food sources. So if you can put red fox urine around your corn, it'll keep it'll deter the raccoons. And I started doing it. I mean, and you think, like, where are you going to get red fox urine? But honestly, I've got it at Walmart in a spray bottle. Just before you go out for a little bit, you want to put a little on. No, it really literally does smell a little bit like a skunk. But Gander Mountain up in Buffalo, I imagine like Cabela's or something like that too. But usually what I do is I try to go corners, and if there's a long side, I'll try to lift up the leaf and spray it under the leaves, so even if it rains, the scent is still underneath the leaves. But usually after every solid rainfall, I keep the bottle right there by the corner. I'll just go psst, 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 just walk around and just give it a little spray.
You have to keep reapplying it after every time
if
it
there's
rains.
a big rain or something like that. I mean, if there's a little sprinkle, you probably don't have to, but it does actually, it absolutely has worked for me in the past. Didn't actually use it at all this year. And, I don't know why nothing ate any of my corn, the deer, the raccoons, or anything. But
well, we were having a lot of trouble with groundhogs. This year was, what we were having a problem with this year.
they are bad in the garden, that's for sure. So what did you do?
Well, nothing really, but I know Carl was pretty upset about it a lot of the time.
I have read that planting onions around their holes will deter them, it'll drive them away.
Around their holes?
Yeah, so you can
their
find
holes that they live in the ground?
Yeah, you plant onions around them, they don't like that.
And they'll move away if you plant onions around their holes?
Yep. I have to admit, I've lied to people that have taken my organic gardening class, and I did tell them that I did that. I did do that, but I also shot them. I 1 year, I mean, they were getting everything. They were getting everything in my garden, and I shot several of them. But I know the 1 year when I was farming full time, like back in the early 90s, I would plant 2,000 lettuce seedlings every other week, so roughly 1,000 a week. And I was losing like 50 to 70 heads a day. So if you lose 70 heads a day for 7 days, that's half of the 1,000 that you planted. And I know one day I had to go to I had other things to do and I couldn't be in the field all day. But long story short, first thing in the morning, I got a rabbit, and it was interesting what it did. It grabbed a head of iceberg lettuce with its front
the rabbit
legs.
did?
Yeah, it grabbed it with like a bear hug with its front legs, and it used the big back legs to kick at the head to split it open so it could get to the tender good stuff in the inside of the head. So I shot it. And I came back at lunchtime, and a big, huge raccoon or a woodchuck was running out. And I got him at a distance. He was a long way away. And I came back in the evening, and I had lost 70 heads that day. I mean, it was 40 earlier in the day, 30 in the evening. And, well, let's just say they didn't bother me anymore after that evening. I got all of them. that night. And I mean, like I said, I mean, people are like, well, you got to have the animals eat some of it. It's like, yeah, but I mean, if you do all the work, do you want to, like, if you had 1,000 lettuce heads a week, do you want the woodchucks to eat 500 of them on you a week?
Well, the thing that we noticed about these groundhogs was they knew what our schedule was.
Oh, absolutely, sure. Well, they live there. You're just a visitor.
They knew they knew when it was safe to be, out and about, and.
Well, one thing I actually did when I lived in Ohio, because my garden was here, and they would come out of this wild area over here. So I took a rope and I tied it to the house, and I strung it all the way out to an apple tree that was in between the garden and there. And I put a ring. I put the string through a ring, hooked the leash onto that, and that was my dog's run. So I would leave her out, and she could be in her doghouse. But if she heard anything, she could run that whole length and keep the raccoons out of my garden, or the woodchucks out of my garden, which definitely helped.
Actually, Carl did set one of those have a heart traps out, and then I think he set a couple of other regular traps, but somehow the groundhogs were smart enough.
They got his bait and didn't eat it?
Well, yeah, he had bait, and the live trap that he had out, he put some of the food that he put inside the trap, and some of it on the outside of the trap. Well, the groundhog ate the stuff that was outside the trap, but wouldn't go in. Wouldn't go in to get the stuff that was inside, and only ate the stuff. Who would have thought that groundhogs are that smart? It never would have occurred to me, but
animals. I mean, when it comes to survival, they'll do what they need to do.
They'll do anything. Yeah.
Right.
Do you know if animals can smell if you're a vegetarian or not? Do you know?
I used to believe that, like when deer hunting, it was good not to eat like pork and beef or whatever before you went
deer hunting. Yeah, I was just wondering, being somebody on a plant-based diet, I wonder if they can tell. I mean, sometimes animals, I can remember being out in late August picking some blackberries, and this was just this past summer, and a deer, a doe with a fawn, was, they were right there next to where I was, under an apple tree, and the doe was eating this unripe apple that had fallen out of the tree. She's standing there and eating it and looking at me while she's eating it. And
oftentimes, I think when you can get real close to them like that, it's because they can't smell you because the wind is blowing from them to you. I've had deer, like, I'm out in the field and
you think that she may have not even realized that I was a person standing there?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I've had them like uncertain of what I am, and they'll snort at you and they'll paw at the ground. They'll come closer and closer and closer to you. And sometimes I have my dogs with me, and I don't want them to come closer because I know the dogs will chase them. But I think sometimes if the wind is right, they'll walk right up at you. I've had them try to sneak up on me because I think they're a little bit curious as to what you are.
They are.
I know one time I was walking in the dark to go out into the back of my field, and I heard like rustling, and I'm like, is that a deer over there? And I have a grunt call, and so I did that just to make it like maybe feel like, okay, maybe that is a deer over there. And I did it a couple of times, and I got back in there, and that deer actually snuck up on me. I still couldn't see it because it was still dark, but he walked right up on me, checking me out because I think again, couldn't wind me, couldn't scent me, and also wasn't quite sure what I was.
Yeah, we had an experience this summer with some does and fawns that were visiting our lawn. Little tiny baby fawns, like newborns and like that. And Carl went out to the garden to get something one morning, you know, kind of late in the spring or something and like that, and he was laughing about it afterwards. He goes, "Those 3 little fawns came running up to me like they wanted me to play with them, and then their mothers came and made them leave," you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I have seen them frolic quite a bit in the springtime. Like males are just like standing their hind legs, like pawing at each other and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say it, but we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives.
If anybody has any questions about fall gardening, call me.
Call Bill Kuwik. Yes. What's your phone number?
640-0924.
Okay.
Text me if you want.
Okay.
Of course, a little late for this year, but you know, next season.
you can call Fredonia Massage Therapy.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on, and I'll see those of you in the viewing audience on the next episode.
Thank you.